You pick xAI's Grok 4 for your production API, the bill lands, and it's double what OpenAI would have charged you for the exact same output tokens. OpenAI is the established API standard with global reach. xAI is the newer challenger with bigger benchmark claims, and one of them is the right bet for your stack. Test 1. Cost and pricing. The day your API bill comes in twice what you budgeted, you're not going to care about benchmark scores. And at 1 million output tokens a day, the difference between $10 per million and $15 per million is real money every single month. So that's where this test starts. I pulled the official pricing pages for both. ChatGPT Plus runs $20 a month. X Premium Plus for Grok Access is $40. So OpenAI is literally half the price at the consumer tier. And on the API side, GPT-4o output tokens are $10 per million versus Grok 4's $15. And at the mini tier, it gets wider because GPT-4o mini is 50 to 60% cheaper on both input and output. OpenAI takes test 1, and it's not subtle. Every single pricing tier goes OpenAI's way, from the consumer subscription all the way down to the budget API tokens, which puts OpenAI up 1-0. And that's the kind of lead that compounds fast when you're running real workloads. I've been deep in both of these APIs long enough to feel that pricing gap in my own invoices, so drop a comment below if an unexpected API bill has ever made you rethink your stack. Test 2. Output quality. The objection I hear constantly is, sure, OpenAI is cheaper, but what if Grok 4 is genuinely smarter and saves you from rerunning prompts? On MMLU and Human Eval, the two most cited general benchmarks, Grok 4 is posting some pretty big numbers, so let's actually look at what those numbers say and what they leave out. I went through the sources myself. Grok 4 claims MMLU 94.1 versus GPT-4o's 88.7, and Human Eval 92.0 versus 87.2 for GPT-4o, which are real gaps on paper. But every single one of those Grok 4 numbers comes from xAI's own announcement blog with zero independent corroboration, and I couldn't find a single third-party audit confirming them. Now, vendor claimed doesn't mean fake, and a 5-point MMLU gap is real enough to pay attention to. But community sentiment around Grok 4's reliability doesn't back up the headline scores, and neither company publishes independently measured hallucination rates. So take the benchmark lead as directional rather than confirmed. And that said, Grok 4 is the only one showing a gap at all on these two dimensions, so the directional call goes its way. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. xAI takes test 2 on the strength of those vendor-claimed benchmark leads, even with the audit caveat attached. And I'll say, I went in expecting this to be a wash, but the self-reported gap is wide enough to force the directional call, which ties us up at 1 apiece. Test 3. Speed, and the number on the table is 120 tokens per second versus 100 per second. Because if you're running a chatbot with real users waiting on responses, a 20% throughput gap can mean the difference between a smooth experience and users refreshing the page. I went through the community-reported figures from both vendor pages. Grok 4 claims around 120 tokens per second. GPT-4o sits around 100, so that's a 20% edge for Grok 4. But I want to flag in line that these come from different testing setups reported off vendor announcement pages rather than an independent head-to-head bench. And time to first token? I couldn't find a published figure for either product on that one. xAI takes test 3 on the throughput claim, which puts xAI ahead 2-1, and I went in thinking speed would be closer given how mature GPT-4o's infrastructure is. But the community-reported numbers consistently favor Grok 4 on raw generation rate. So xAI is up 2-1 right now, and that might already have you rethinking things, but ease of use and platform availability are still on the table. And those two dimensions decide whether any of those gains are actually accessible when you're shipping something real. Test 4. Ease of use, And the scenario I keep coming back to is you're trying to integrate a new API on a Friday afternoon, and the docs are missing half the parameters you need, which means you're losing hours. And OpenAI's documentation covers Python, Node, Go, .NET, and more, while xAI's is community reported as limited by comparison. So that gap has a real cost in developer time. OpenAI's platform is extensively documented with broad SDK support across multiple languages, and years of third-party tooling, community answers, and tutorials back it up, while xAI's docs are consistently described as limited by those same community sources. And one thing working in xAI's favor is the OpenAI compatible API endpoint, which lowers switching friction, but it doesn't close the ecosystem gap. OpenAI takes test 4, and that ties us back up at 2 apiece, and the builder decision lens here is pretty clear. If you're integrating today and you need answers when you get stuck, OpenAI's ecosystem is years ahead of where xAI is right now. Test 5, platform availability and limits, and the scenario is your product goes live. Users outside the supported regions hit a wall, and you're scrambling to explain why the API isn't responding for half your audience, because OpenAI's API is globally available with tiered rate limits that scale with your spend, while xAI's is limited to select regions with lower rate limits. OpenAI's API is available globally with rate limits that scale as you spend more, while xAI's API is available in select regions only, and community sources consistently report its rate limits as lower than OpenAI's, which is a real constraint on production workloads, and ChatGPT runs on iOS, Android, and web as a standalone product, while Grok is tied primarily to the X platform, which is a genuine edge if your users live there, but a limitation for everyone else. OpenAI takes test 5, and that's the final score. OpenAI wins 3-2, and the 3 dimensions OpenAI takes, cost, ease of use, and platform availability, are exactly the ones that govern whether you can actually ship something with this today. OpenAI wins on cost at every tier, half the consumer subscription price, $10 per million output tokens versus 15, and GPT-4o Mini is 50 to 60% cheaper than Grok 4 Mini. And when you stack global API availability, higher tiered rate limits, and a years-deep developer ecosystem with broad SDK support on top of that, it's the clear production-ready choice. xAI wins on vendor-claimed benchmark scores, MMLU 94.1 versus 88.7, and Human Evil 92.0 versus 87.2, and on raw generation throughput at roughly 120 tokens per second versus 100. And if you're building something X-native and need real-time social data access, Grok 4's platform integration is something OpenAI simply doesn't offer, and the OpenAI compatible endpoint keeps switching costs low. If you're shipping a production API today, go OpenAI. $10 per million output tokens, global reach, and an ecosystem that actually answers your questions at 2 a.m. And the only time I'd seriously evaluate xAI first is if you're building X native and need real-time social data, or you want to personally stress test whether those vendor benchmark numbers hold up in your specific workflow. Something the docs don't tell you, xAI's API uses an OpenAI compatible endpoint format, which sounds great for migration, but neither company publishes uptime SLAs or incident response commitments in their public documentation. So if your production workload hits a reliability incident, you have zero contractual recourse on either side, unless you're on an enterprise tier. And xAI hasn't published enterprise pricing at all. If this comparison got you thinking about the model quality side of things, I ran the same kind of breakdown on Claude Mythos versus GPT 5.5, and the benchmark story there is a lot messier than the marketing suggests, so that video is up next.